The hill country of Ephraim carried a stillness that settled deeply across the land in the early days when Israel was ruled not by kings but by judges. And every household moved through seasons of hardship and hope, trusting the God who had brought their fathers through wilderness and war. In those days, families journeyed year after year to Shiloh, where the tabernacle stood with its curtains weathered by time, its wooden pillars darkened by age, and its courtyard echoing with the murmurs of prayers carried upward like rising smoke from the altar. Among those who traveled the winding roads to Shiloh was a man named Elkanah, a Levite from the region of Ramathaim. He was known among his people as a man respectable in character, one who tended to his household with earnestness, and sought to honor the God of Israel with offerings and with reverence. His journey to Shiloh was never one of obligation, but of devotion, for the center of worship was the anchor of his life. With him journeyed two women, Peninnah, who bore children that filled the tents with youthful voices, and Hannah, whose silence and motherhood carried a deeper ache than any word could express. Hannah moved through the camp with quiet grace, but within her heart churned a heaviness that pressed upon her spirit each passing year. The joy of others did not stir jealousy within her, but the longing for a child, the longing to cradle life. To raise a son who might walk in the ways of the Lord grew sharper as time wore on. Scripture recalls plainly that she had no children, for the Lord had closed her womb, 1 Samuel 1-5. This barrenness was not merely a physical emptiness. It was a wound in a culture where children were seen as both blessing and legacy. Without them, a woman carried not simply sorrow but the weight of unanswered purpose. Peninnah's children raced through the encampment, their laughter swirling through the air. But Peninnah herself, perceiving the sorrow in Hannah's eyes, allowed bitterness to root in her heart. Year after year she provoked her rival, taunting her with words sharpened like thorns, reminding her of what she lacked. Her jabs were not always loud, but they cut deeply, and Hannah often slipped away from the others. Finding quiet corners near the tents where the campfires could not illuminate, the grief settled upon her face. Elkanah, seeing the distress of Hannah, attempted to comfort her. "Why weepest thou, and why eatest thou not? Am not I better to thee than 10 sons?" Samuel 1-8. His words came with sincerity, yet they could not reach the depth of Hannah's burden. How could he? For her longing was not born out of selfish desire, but out of yearning for the fulfillment of something sacred, something ancient, woven into the fabric of motherhood. She longed to dedicate a child to the service of the Lord, for she believed her life would only be complete if her womb could bear one who would stand before God in truth. The evening sacrifices burned low. Shadows stretched across the courtyard like dark ribbons as twilight settled upon Shiloh. The sons of Eli, Hophni, and Phinehas carried out their duties with motions that had long since lost their reverence, unaware that their conduct before the Lord would later bring calamity upon their house. But it was Eli, aged and observant, seated upon his customary stool near the entrance of the tabernacle, who noticed Hannah as she approached the sacred space. Her steps were deliberate, her breathing uneven, and her spirit stirred with an intensity born of years of unspoken prayer. She knelt near one of the supporting pillars of the structure and let her anguish pour out silently before God. Her lips moved, but her voice made no sound, for this was not a prayer meant for the ears of men. It was the cry of a wounded soul seeking deliverance. She vowed unto the Lord, saying, "O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt indeed look on the affliction of thine handmaid, and remember me, and not forget thine handmaid, but wilt give unto thine handmaid a man-child, then will I give him unto the Lord all the days of his life." 1 Samuel 1:11. This vow was not spoken lightly. To give a son fully to the service of the Lord was to surrender one's greatest treasure. But Hannah's faith had reached a place where surrender was the only path to peace. Eli, watching from his seat, misinterpreted her trembling lips and drawn expression, assuming she had consumed wine. He approached her with a stern tone, saying, "How long wilt thou be drunken? Put away thy wine from thee." 1 Samuel 1:14. The accusation stung, yet Hannah did not rise in anger. She lifted her face and answered with humility, "No, my Lord, I am a woman of a sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord." 1 Samuel 1:15. Her words softened Eli's heart, and he perceived the sincerity of her anguish. He blessed her, saying, "Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant thee thy petition, that thou hast asked of him. 1 Samuel 1:17. Peace settled upon her spirit in a way that had eluded her for years. Her face brightened, her tears subsided, and for the first time in a long while, she partook of food and found rest as the night wrapped itself around the camp. When the morning sun lifted above the hills, casting its glow across the tents and illuminating the tabernacle with a soft golden light, the family rose early and worshipped before the Lord. The journey back to Ramah was quieter, but not with sorrow. Hannah carried within her a quiet assurance. Something had shifted, something unseen but powerful. Her prayer had been offered, her vow had been made, and she returned home with the conviction that the God who had opened seas and routed armies could open the womb of a humble woman longing to dedicate her child to his service. The seasons turned, and in time Hannah conceived. The scripture records simply and beautifully that the Lord remembered her. 1 Samuel 1:19. In due season she bore a son and named him Samuel, saying, "Because I have asked him of the Lord." 1 Samuel 1:20. Every moment of his infancy carried meaning, for Hannah knew that one day she would fulfill her vow and bring him to Shiloh, offering him back to the one who had answered her. Yet she cherished every early moment, knowing each was a gift both precious and temporary, a preparation for the greater purpose awaiting her son. Life in Ramah during those early years unfolded with rhythms shaped by the seasons and the customs of a people still learning what it meant to walk faithfully before their God. The land around Hannah's home grew thick with grain as spring rains fed the soil, and the hills rolled gently toward the distant horizon. Children's laughter often drifted from neighboring homes, and the lowing of livestock filled the valleys during the early hours of the morning. In the midst of this familiar world, Hannah nurtured her son with a devotion strengthened by the vow she carried within her heart. Samuel grew quickly, his early years marked by the tenderness of a mother who cherished each moment with deep awareness that time was temporary. Hannah rocked him in the cool shade beside the stone walls of their home, whispering prayers over him as he slept. She traced the curves of his small hands, knowing those hands would one day serve in the sanctuary at Shiloh. She marveled at the softness of his hair, the brightness of his eyes, the way he clutched her garments when startled or delighted, and every small movement etched itself into her memory like inscriptions upon a scroll. Yet intertwined with her joy was a quiet preparation. She did not allow her heart to cling too tightly, for love, in her eyes, was not the possession of a mother alone, but an offering to the God who had answered her in the sanctuary. When Elkanah prepared for the yearly pilgrimage, Hannah did not join them during Samuel's earliest years. She explained gently, "I will not go up until the child be weaned, and then I will bring him, that he may appear before the Lord, and there abide forever." 1 Samuel 1:22. Her husband, honoring her devotion, answered, "Do what seemeth thee good," trusting her wisdom and respecting her vow. Those years of nursing and raising Samuel were filled with a sacred intentionality. Hannah not only nurtured his body, but shaped his heart. She taught him stories of their ancestors, of Abraham's obedience, of Miriam's courage, of the judges who rose to deliver Israel in times of distress. She spoke of the holiness surrounding the tabernacle and how his life would one day be woven into that sacred environment. Samuel's earliest whispers of language often followed her voice, as though he were learning the shape of devotion before he understood its depth. The day soon came when Samuel was weaned, and Hannah's heart trembled neither with regret nor reluctance, but with the solemn awareness that the fulfillment of her vow had arrived. She prepared a coat for him, a small linen ephod fashioned with care, one that resembled the garments worn by those who served in the sanctuary. Stitch by stitch, she wove threads of love, dedication, and quiet sorrow into its fabric. This coat would mark him as one set apart, a symbol of her vow and of God's faithfulness. When the time came, Elkanah gathered offerings for the journey, choosing a 3-year-old bull, an ephah of flour, and a bottle of wine for sacrifice. Hannah carried Samuel by the hand as they began the pilgrimage toward Shiloh. The road felt familiar, yet it bore new meaning, as though each step echoed with the weight of her vow. Samuel toddled beside her, unaware of the destiny unfolding around him. Travelers passing along the same route greeted them with nods and blessings, but none knew the profound exchange soon to occur within the sacred courtyard. Upon reaching Shiloh, the familiar sight of the tabernacle stirred memories within Hannah, memories of tears, of silent prayers, of Eli's blessings spoken years before. The structure stood as it always had, weathered but steady, its curtains fluttering gently with the wind. The altar crackled as offerings burned and priests moved through the sacred space with steady routine. Hannah felt her heart swell and tighten as she approached Eli. She stood before the aged priest, her son by her side, and said, "O my Lord, I am the woman that stood by thee here, praying unto the Lord. For this child I prayed. The Lord hath given me my petition, which I asked of him." 1 Samuel 1:26-27. Her voice did not shake, for what she offered was not loss but fulfillment. She continued, "Therefore also I have lent him to the Lord. As long as he liveth, he shall be lent to the Lord." 1 Samuel 1:28. Samuel, unaware of the depth of the moment, gazed around with wide eyes at the sanctuary, at the flicker of the altar's flames, at the solemn motions of the priests. Eli placed his hands upon the child, blessing him quietly. The sacrifice was offered, and Hannah's vow was completed. Samuel remained at Shiloh, a young child entrusted to Eli's care, destined to grow in the presence of the Lord. Yet Hannah's story did not end in sorrow. After she fulfilled her vow, her heart rose in a song, one of the most profound prayers ever spoken in Scripture. Her voice lifted with strength and humility, declaring, "My heart rejoiceth in the Lord. The bows of the mighty men are broken, and they that stumbled are girded with strength." 1 Samuel 2:1-4. This song was not merely thanksgiving for a child, it was a proclamation of God's sovereignty, a recognition that He elevates the lowly and humbles the proud, that He guards the feet of the faithful, and brings to nothing the schemes of the wicked. Her hymn resonated through the courtyard, echoing off the walls of the sanctuary, carrying with it the hope of generations yet to come. Those who heard it sensed that the words bore weight not only for the present moment but for Israel's unfolding future. For within her song lay themes that would echo again in later generations, carrying the spirit of reversal, restoration, and hope. When the pilgrimage ended, Elkanah and Hannah returned to Ramah. The absence of Samuel left a quiet space within the home, yet Hannah's heart did not fracture under the weight. Instead, it expanded with new understanding of sacrifice. She had given her son to God, and in doing so, had found a deeper purpose than she had ever imagined. Each year she returned to Shiloh with Elkanah, carrying with her a new coat she had woven for Samuel larger than the last, fitted to his growing frame. She saw him year after year, watched him mature before the Lord, and saw Eli bless them again, praying that God would give Hannah children for the one she had dedicated. And God did so. Hannah later bore sons and daughters, yet Samuel remained the child of her vow, as the one whose life would shape the course of Israel's future. The years that followed marked a quiet transformation within Shiloh, as the presence of a child growing under the shadow of the tabernacle drew the attention of all who passed through its courts. The sanctuary itself remained unchanged in structure, the wooden frames draped with woven curtains. The footsteps grew more confident across the courtyard stones. His young voice, soft yet steady, blended with the daily hum of priestly duties, as though a new thread had been woven into the ancient fabric of worship. Eli, aged and increasingly burdened by the weight of his failing eyesight, watched the boy with a mixture of gratitude and solemn expectation. The priest recognized in Samuel a purity that contrasted greatly with the corruption of his own sons. Hophni and Phinehas, whose actions had drawn the judgment of heaven upon their household, Scripture records that they knew not the Lord. 1 Samuel 2:12. And their deeds, marked by greed, disrespect for offerings, and immoral acts, cast long shadows across the sanctuary. Worshippers whispered of their behavior in low voices as they approached the altar, fearful of the consequences that such irreverence would eventually bring. Yet within that same sanctuary, Samuel moved with sincerity. His presence became a quiet counterweight to the darkness around him. Clad in the small linen ephod his mother had woven, he learned to perform simple tasks, opening the doors of the tabernacle each morning, assisting with preparations for offerings, carrying water, tending lamps, and helping Eli navigate the space he no longer saw clearly. His hands were small, but eager. His heart was young, but steadfast. Those who observed him remarked that he grew before the Lord, 1 Samuel 2:21. And they sensed that the child was being shaped for something far beyond the duties of a humble servant. In Ramah, Hannah continued to live with a heart anchored in her vow, yet warmed by the children God had granted after Samuel. Her household grew with sons and daughters who filled the rooms with movement and sound. But there was always a moment each year, set apart from the rhythm of daily life, when she journeyed once again to Shiloh. She carried with her a new coat for Samuel, woven with the same care as the first, yet larger, sturdier, tailored to his growing stature. A mother's love, a vow honored, and a belief that her son served a purpose shaped by the Almighty. When Hannah arrived at the sanctuary, Samuel ran to greet her, his eyes bright, his voice filled with youthful warmth. Though their time together was brief, those reunions held a depth that surpassed everyday closeness. It was as though the distance between Ramah and Shiloh had strengthened their bond rather than weakened it. Eli blessed Elkanah and Hannah each year, saying, "The Lord give thee seed of this woman for the loan which is lent to the Lord," 1 Samuel 2:20. And the blessing held true, for Hannah's household flourished. At the center of her devotion remained the child she had entrusted to the sanctuary. She returned home after each pilgrimage with quiet satisfaction, not one born of pride, but one emerging from the knowledge that faith, when surrendered wholly, bore fruit that stretched far beyond one lifetime. Meanwhile, Shiloh bore witness to a widening contrast. The misconduct of Hophni and Phinehas grew more blatant, their disregard for the sacred reaching the ears of the people with increasing alarm. Eli received reports of their behavior, how they took choice portions of meat before the offerings were completed. Within this climate of disobedience, Samuel continued to grow. His innocence did not blind him to the tension surrounding the sanctuary, but his heart remained anchored. His conduct served as a subtle reminder that purity could still thrive amidst corruption, and his presence became a symbol of hope to a people weary of hearing reports of priestly misconduct. It was during these years that the word of the Lord became precious in Israel. Its visions were rare, and prophetic guidance had grown scarce, 1 Samuel 3:1. The people sensed that something was missing, a silence where God's voice once echoed through judges and prophets. Yet within the quiet, something was stirring. The Almighty, who had opened Hannah's womb in response to her prayer, now prepared to open a different door, the door through which Samuel would step into the calling meant for him. Night settled heavily over Shiloh as Samuel entered another season of growth. He slept within the sanctuary near the Ark of God, though not inside the Holy of Holies, but in chambers nearby where priests and attendants rested. The lamps flickered softly in the darkness, their flames swaying with the stillness of the air. Eli slept nearby, blind and weary, unaware that a shift in Israel's spiritual landscape was moments away. Samuel stirred from sleep as a voice called his name clear, gentle, and unmistakably real. Samuel, believing Eli had summoned him, the boy rose and hurried to the priest's side. "Here am I, for thou callest me," he said. But Eli shook his head and told him he had not called, sending him back to rest. The voice called again. Samuel obeyed again. A third time the call came, and Samuel's footsteps echoed softly across the sanctuary floor as he approached Eli once more. With slow understanding, Eli recognized that the Lord was calling the boy. He instructed Samuel, "When he calleth thee, thou shalt say, Speak, Lord. For thy servant heareth." 1 Samuel 3-9. Samuel returned to his place, the silence thick around him. When the voice came again, "Samuel, Samuel," the boy answered as Eli had instructed. And in that moment, the Almighty spoke to him, delivering a message that would mark the beginning of Samuel's prophetic role. It was a heavy word, one foretelling judgment upon Eli's house because of the corruption of his sons and the priest's failure to restrain them. The message weighed on Samuel's spirit as dawn approached. He lay awake, uncertain of how to speak such words to the man who had raised him, who had guided him in the sanctuary. But when morning came, and Eli asked what the Lord had spoken, Samuel revealed the message in full. Eli received it with resignation, saying, "It is the Lord. Let him do what seemeth him good." 1 Samuel 3:18. From that day forward, the word of the Lord returned to Israel, beginning through the voice of the child Hannah had prayed for. The child she had offered back to God long before his purpose became clear. Samuel grew, and the Lord was with him, and all Israel, from Dan to Beersheba, that he was established. In the years that followed Samuel's awakening to the voice of the Almighty, his presence in Israel became a quiet but unmistakable force. Word traveled from village to village, carried by shepherds, traders, and travelers who passed through Shiloh and returned with accounts of a young prophet whose words carried the weight of truth. Israel, long accustomed to silence from heaven, now sensed the stirrings of renewal. The voice of the Lord, once rare, now flowed through Samuel with clarity, and the people felt both hope and unease. For prophetic words often carried warnings as well as promises. Yet even as Samuel grew in stature, the shadows that had gathered around Shiloh deepened. The corruption of Hophni and Phinehas had not diminished but intensified, and the murmurs of the people grew louder as they witnessed acts that dishonored the sanctuary. Their actions reflected not only personal corruption, but a national decline. For when the priests faltered, the people's reverence weakened. Israel struggled against threats from surrounding nations, particularly the Philistines, whose encampments pressed closer to Israelite borders with each passing season. Tensions simmered like the dry air before a summer storm. Meanwhile, Hannah watched her sons rise from afar. Each year when she journeyed to the sanctuary with Elkanah, she saw Samuel standing taller, his presence more assured, his eyes carrying a depth that seemed beyond his years. The coats she crafted for him no longer fit the small frame of a child, but draped the shoulders of a youth growing into manhood. When she placed the garment over him, she could feel the quiet strength woven not only into the cloth, but into his very spirit. She saw Eli nearby, leaning heavily on his staff, age carving deeper lines across his face. She sensed that her son's role was expanding, that the sanctuary he served in stood at the threshold of momentous change. Shiloh itself felt restless. Pilgrims arrived with caution, murmuring among themselves about the state of leadership. The tabernacle's curtains fluttered in the wind like worn banners of a kingdom in decline. Yet Samuel's presence brought balance to the unease. His voice, steady, honest, uncorrupted, became the anchor of the sanctuary. The people recognized in him the righteousness they longed for. And though he did not wield authority through lineage or age, he carried it through the truth that resonated from his lips. The warning given to Eli through Samuel began to unfold with somber inevitability. A time came when the Philistines rose against Israel, setting the stage for a battle near Ebenezer. Israel's elders, seeking guidance, decided to bring the Ark of the Covenant from Shiloh to the battlefield, believing its presence would secure victory. But their intentions were misguided, for their hearts were not aligned with the reverence required to carry the sacred ark. Hophni and Phinehas escorted it, their impurity staining the sacred act. Samuel, though still young, sensed the gravity of what was unfolding. The ark was more than an object of power. It was the symbol of God's presence among his people, entrusted to the sanctuary under strict commands. As it left Shiloh, the sound of rejoicing rose from the Israelite camp. Yet an undercurrent of dread seemed to follow the ark's departure, as though the very land held its breath. The battle turned against Israel. 30,000 foot soldiers fell. The ark was captured. Hophni and Phinehas perished on the field. A messenger fled to Shiloh with garments torn and dust upon his head, bringing the devastating news. When Eli heard that the ark had been taken, he fell backward from his seat, his neck breaking under the force. Israel entered a season of mourning darker than any in recent memory. The loss of the ark cast a great shadow across the nation. Shiloh, once bustling with worshippers, became a place of lament. The tabernacle stood like a hollow shell, its sacred heart removed. The people wandered in grief, unsure of how to interpret the calamity. For generations, the ark had been the visible representation of God's covenant, and now it rested in the hands of their enemies. Through the turmoil, Samuel rose into leadership, not by force, not by inheritance, but because the presence of the Lord remained with him. He spoke to the people with clarity, calling them to repentance, urging them to turn away from the idols that had crept into their homes and hearts. If you do return unto the Lord with all your hearts, he warned them, then put away the strange gods, and prepare your hearts unto the Lord, and serve him only. 1 Samuel 7-3. His words resonated with a people humbled by defeat. They gathered at Mizpah fasting, confessing their transgressions and seeking restoration under Samuel's guidance. The Philistines, perceiving Israel's gathering as preparation for rebellion, marched upon Mizpah. Fear spread among the people. But Samuel stood firm. He offered a lamb as a burnt offering and cried unto the Lord for Israel. As the sacrifice burned, a great thunder rolled across the sky, shaking the earth with force that startled both armies. The Philistines fled in confusion, and Israel pursued them, securing victory not by strength of arms, but through the intervention of the Almighty. After the triumph, Samuel set up a stone between Mizpah and Shen, naming it Ebenezer. Hitherto hath the Lord helped us. 1 Samuel 7:12. It stood as a reminder not of Israel's prowess, but of God's mercy. Through these years of upheaval, Hannah's legacy endured quietly, yet profoundly. She had offered one child, but through him, a nation was being steered away from collapse. Her faith, once expressed in silent words at the sanctuary's entrance, now echoed across Israel through Samuel's leadership. Samuel continued judging Israel, traveling in a circuit between Bethel, Gilgal, Mizpah, and returning to Ramah. His reputation grew. He restored stability, calling the people back to obedience, guiding them with fairness and wisdom. Yet even as he maintained his role, he carried the humility of one who remembered where his life began, in the arms of a mother who had prayed, not for honor but for the chance to give her son to a higher purpose. In Ramah, Hannah watched from afar as her son's name spread throughout the land. There was no pride in her gaze, only gratitude and reverence. She saw in him the fulfillment of a promise, both hers and God's. And though the ark would eventually return under different circumstances, and new periods of history would rise in Israel, Samuel's early years in Shiloh remained the foundation of everything he would become. The years that followed unfolded with a quiet steadiness, as though the land itself recognized that a shift had taken place among the people. The ark still rested at Shiloh, the priests continued their duties, and families traveled from distant towns for sacrifices and festivals. Yet Hannah's place within this living tapestry had deepened in ways few could see on the surface. She moved with the calm assurance of a woman who had tasted the faithfulness of the one she called upon. A woman who carried no bitterness from her past afflictions and no pride from her answered petition. The echo of her vow lived within her like a steady fire, a reminder of promises fulfilled and promises still unfolding. Hannah aged gracefully, observing the changes in her nation with a measured spirit. She knew the land had entered a season of upheaval, but she also sensed that the one who had heard her prayer still guided Israel through its storms. Her story did not begin with triumph, nor did it rise from ease. It began in sorrow, moved through trust, and culminated in a legacy that touched the destiny of a nation. In quiet strength, she had lived the truth of her own prayer, that the one who raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap, 1 Samuel 2-8, could reshape the course of a life and, through one life, the course of a people. Though generations would retell Samuel's deeds with wonder, the foundation of his story would remain anchored in the faith of the woman who had cried out in the sanctuary's dim light. Out in that, Hannah's life became more than the fulfillment of a vow. It became a testament to the power of persistent devotion. Through her, the land had witnessed not merely the birth of a prophet, but the revelation that wholehearted surrender can become the seed from which nations rise and histories turn. And so Hannah's journey stands as a living monument within the ancient pages, a reminder that even the quietest cry can shape the destiny of generations. Her faith, forged in the deep places of longing, became the foundation upon which a prophet was raised, a nation was guided, and a legacy was formed. Her story invites every listener to consider the unseen pathways shaped by perseverance, trust, and surrender. As the years pass and the memory of her prayer echoes across the ages, Hannah's faith continues to speak, urging all who hear to remember that great movements often begin in the hidden chambers of the heart, where the deepest petitions rise and are answered in their appointed time. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell. More Bible figures await.